Hi everyone, I am Corion, your witch in residence here on YouTube. And today I wanted to talk about The League of Extraordinary Gentlemen. Now, for those of you who don't really know it, this is one of Mr. Moore's more intriguing works. What he did was he took a series of Victorian characters, heroes, and put them all together in the same spot for the first time and turned them into kind of a Victorian era Avengers, if you will, treating each one's backstory like their original movie. And then this is the new one where they all come together to face the greater foe. Now, in it, we see a sequence of different heroes. We have Alan Quartermain, who was blessed by an African witch doctor, supposedly, to so that he would never die so long as Africa lived. Okay. We have the Invisible Man who drank a elixir when he was running around and stealing stuff from a lab and it turned him invisible. We have Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde who upon drinking a potion who Dr. Jekyll is the only one who knows how to create turns into a gigantic Victorian vice monster, I guess is the best way to put it. We have Agatha Harkness. Miss Harkness has contracted vampirism from her dealings with Vlad Dracula. We have Tom Sawyer, who grew up being tricky and learned to be a great shot. And we have Dorian Gray, who we've covered on this channel previously. And we also have Captain Nemo, whose science is what has brought him to the forefront, as he's the first person to travel the seas in what apparently amounts to a Victorian era nuclear powered submarine. Okay. So, why do I bring this movie up? Because each of these characters has a dramatically different background. Each of these characters is from a dramatically different culture. And yet they figured out ways to work together more or less by trying to be polite to each other and get to know one another in that kind of classical style. And the truth of the matter is, we don't really, these days anyway, love offer the Victorian era politeness because we think it's putting on airs. But I think if we watch this movie and we watch it for the first half where they're still trying to get to know and learn about each other, we would see that the protocols they seem to follow in social status and standing are actually there to provide a common ground for them to suss out how they feel about each individual person and what they think of them. And that's an interesting thing. And that's an important thing, I think, too. Because as one of my favorite authors once said, that if we think about social interaction like a working machine, politeness, formality, protocol is the oil that helps that machine's gears work well together, even when they don't perfectly fit. And when we forget those protocols, when we forget to treat each other with respect by means of what our era and our culture say is respectful, then we wind up throwing sand into those gears instead of trying to smooth out the rough edges. So, I mean, yes, this movie is not great, but it does give us an interesting insight to look at here, right? We have um, Nemo is portrayed as someone from the Indian subcontinent. We have French individuals. We have Harkness, which I would argue is probably German slash Romanian, as she traveled with Van Helsing. Um, we have Alan Quartermain, who grew up in the era of African hunters, right? Great white hunters that travel down to Africa, which is a unique culture, I would argue, all on its own. And yet all of them are also working in this Victorian understanding that comes to Dorian Gray. And we see that everyone starts very formal and very polite and uses formal language when talking to each other. But as they get to know each other, as they become better friends, the conversation becomes more relaxed. And I think that's we've forgotten that template to the modern day. And I feel like it is something that we should look at. We don't necessarily have to be super formal, but we should be treating people with respect. We should be treating them with how would I how would you like me to address you? Um, right? Or even just say their name as more of a question, and then they can reply with what their name actually is. But there are ways to be kind in a polite way, because one of the most important things I think we can ever do when we greet somebody whose culture, whose background, whose whatever we're not familiar with, is do so with respect as far as you're aware. And any time where you're unsure of the protocol, ask questions, right? Nobody's going to be upset that you said to them, you know, how dare you ask whether I should be called sir or something else, right? They're going to respond going, okay, this is what you should know, right? This is how I prefer to be addressed, right? If we ask, topics that are relatively safe, engage their interest in where things are, perhaps we can find where the niche is, where we can take conversations, where we can ask more quizzical questions. For example, if I was talking to somebody about what they do, I would probably talk about what they do and then ask probing questions about their job. Oh, do you work a lot with computers? Do you do this? Do you do that? And find out where their interests are and go from there. And, ask polite, safe topics to start with until you know what. If you ask somebody, something about their politics or what have you, we can ask them in a way that is going to show that we're not inherently dismissive based on those politics, but we want to know how they feel about things. And we want to do that after we get to know somebody, right? So, what I would suggest and what I would ask you guys to do is actually watch this movie again and watch how people act to each other, watch how people treat each other, at least until a lot of the formality is dropped. And maybe take a look at what they did and ask yourself, did what this person say make it easier for that person to form a relationship with somebody else? Right? Did the way Quartermain talked to Dorian Gray help facilitate the relationship there, or did it pour sand into the gears? Right? We could do this exercise with just about any movie, but I think it'd be useful here. I think you guys would find it fascinating, and who knows, we all might learn a thing or two. So that's what I'm hoping you guys will do, and in the comments, hopefully you can follow up on that. The only other stuff I want to mention is that there is another piece to this particular movie, and that's the different paths to power. Now, in the Wiccan tradition, they teach us that there are 8 paths to power. Some are far more dangerous than others. Meditation and learning to focus is most definitely one, and it's one I highly prize. Developing a relationship with the divine is another one. The use of ritual dance and raising cones of power, ritual chanting is another. Alteration of senses through external stimuli is another one. That one to me is one of the most dangerous, because I feel like the chances of winding up in a Jekyll and Hyde scenario are just simply too dangerous to not be concerned about. Because whenever you're using external chemicals to alter your consciousness, there's a risk of becoming addicted to that sensation. And while I know I don't have a fairly addictive personality, I can give stuff up fairly easily. I don't want to push that. I don't want to test that. I would much rather we not find out certain things about ourselves in some ways. So those are a few of them, and I wanted to mention this because each of these people has picked a different path to power, right? Solomon's path to power involved good deeds for others, right? Um, Miss Harkness's path to power resulted from a tryst with a vampire, right? We have the stealing invisibility potions. We have the con games that Sawyer played. We have each of these different pieces, each of these random paths to power here. And I think it's important to ask ourselves if we see paths to power for ourselves moving forward. And if we do, what we want to do about them, right? What are the risks? What are the challenges? And do we even want to start down that path? Now, for me personally, I've always felt that power should always come from a need, not from a want. If you want power, you're probably not the right person to get it. But if you need it to accomplish a goal that you have with somebody else that you're trying to do something good for, that's a worthwhile pursuit to power. And there are healthy ways to go about it: focus, meditation, dance, chants. These sort of things are significantly less dangerous and will get you the result, but they do require more work. They do require more focus than some of the shorter paths. So consider that the next time you are offered power by an opportunity. One of my teachers had a very wise way of putting this, and it was, is the juice worth the squeeze? Right? What are you willing to pay to get that power? And don't say anything, because that's dangerous, right? I mean, that puts you on paths that no other can follow. Think about it instead as the, what paths do you want to take that are not going to result in long-term harm to get you where you want to be? And take those paths. They require more work, but ultimately they're worth it. Because power without knowledge and power without focus won't get you to where you need to be long term. It takes time. It takes work and it takes effort. So, while personally I have no problem with people choosing to use chemicals of whatever variety, whether organic or inorganic, to attempt to learn and gain insight and gain awakenings of the spirit, I would be very cautious doing it. I would say that there are always safe ways to do things, and there are some things that, and if it's not safe at any dosage, I wouldn't use it. Okay? There's no reason to risk yourself. There's no reason to risk yourself for the others around you. There are always alternatives to those kind of dangerous things. But if it doesn't hurt you and it won't hurt somebody else, and you want to try it, try it. But just be aware that addictions can happen and you have to be careful about it. And if you do find yourself on a path that you know is leading to dark places and you need help, reach out. Okay, there's a community here, there's a community elsewhere, and we all want to help you out because these things are important. And we're not a community unless we work together to take care of the people around us. So if you want, in the comments today, let's talk about your particular path to power. What are you doing to get what you need to move forward in your life? What I'm doing is I'm doing a lot of research. I'm reading a lot because ultimately reading more about my day job is going to help me earn more money, and more money is going to help me make this channel even better. So that's what I'm doing, and I hope you guys will share your strategies for how you are getting to where you want to be. All right, guys, that's what I've got. I'm going to close it off here. Merry meet, merry part, merry meet again. Take care, everybody. Bye bye.